Good evening, everyone. It is Dr. Demi here. I know it is late. It is 10:23, but I have been busy at the EdLock conference, so I did not get an opportunity to hop on earlier. It has been nonstop networking and connecting with people and just being in a great space with like-minded people. So I have not had an opportunity, but I am making the time now at 10:23 Eastern Standard Time to log on and just commit to the live that I'm said I was going to commit to every week. And so here we go. So I hope you all have had a fantastic Monday. So let's hop right into it. This evening, tonight, I should say, is part 4, which is the final part of the 4-part series about balancing high performance and your well-being as a school leader. And so this session will explore the early warning signs of um, of leadership imbalance, right? And provide some practical strategies for addressing these signs before they escalate into burnout, right? Or even decreased team morale, right? So understanding these warning signs can help you develop more proactive strategies as a leader. And so for anyone listening in, if this is the first time you're listening in or watching the replay, my name is Dr. Demi Thomas, and I have been in education for some decades now. And my passion is empowering urban school leaders, right? And really working in a space where I help school leaders find that sweet spot between high performance and healthy culture in their buildings so that they can transform instructional culture and feel affirmed in the work that they do as school leaders, right? And I know this because I have been a school leader. And so I understand the nuances and the demands that school leadership requires. And so as a product of public school and urban school, I believe I am an advocate for it. And I believe that we have the power to change the systems that continually oppress Black and Brown kids and our most marginalized students. So we have the power to do this, right? And disruption is what's required. It requires us to be courageous, to push back, and to create the disruption that's needed to change the current conditions that we have our Black and Brown kids in, because it's not working, right? And so this live is about having conversations on how leaders can actually become more effective in their role, and to actually think and start thinking about what's needed for the change to actually occur. Okay. And so I'm excited for several reasons. Well, one, in my book that's coming out this month, Decisions by Fire, 3 Phases to Define Your Leadership Strengths and Decision Making, I talk about the balance at the core, right, of strong, empathetic leadership. And so when we as leaders fail to maintain our own balance, the ripple effect is felt by teams, right? And so we're going to dive into this concept a little more, and hopefully, you will be able to apply some of the actionable steps that I'm going to share with you. So think about this for a second. How do you currently balance pushing your team to high expectations with ensuring that they don't burn out? So we know as a leader, you have high expectations for your staff, right? And your leadership team is your go-to. They're your right hand. So how do you balance pushing your team's high expectations with ensuring that they don't burn out? So take a second and think about that, right? And then the second question I have for you to think about while you're listening to this live is, how are you modeling the balance between high performance and well-being for your team? Right? Are you the first one in the building? Are you the last one to leave? Are you sending emails on the weekend? Right? We're going to get into that. So think about that. Like, how are you modeling the balance for your team? Right? Because the truth is, as a leader, what you're modeling is what you're also expecting. And even though you may not say that, that's how it comes across. Okay. So this evening, we're going to break down how to strike that balance between high expectations and well-being for you and your team. And hopefully you'll walk away with some strategies. So let's get into the first thing, right? The role of the leader in your building, the role of you as the leader in your building is to set the tone for balance, right? So in my book, Decisions by Fire, I discuss the concept of process power, right? That is phase two of the framework of the change the narrative framework, process power. The second phase. So this is where you as a leader must establish systems that guide your team's performance, right? But equally the processes that protect well-being, right? So system and structures are needed, but systems and structures are also needed to protect well-being. So as leaders, you are the architects of that balance. You. What you model, your team will adopt. Okay? So about let me just give you an example. So I I once coached a principal who was, known for setting high standards, really high standards for adults and belief in kids, which is awesome. But the teachers were always on edge, right? They were always pushing themselves to exhaustion because they believed the same thing that the school leader believed. They believed in kids, right? They worked tirelessly to meet the high expectations of the school leader, right? And then working with that school leader, like working together and introducing balance, I had to we had to come to an understanding of how do you lead by example by setting reasonable work hours. If you're emailing your staff after work every day of the week, on the weekends, all day long, right? If you are responding to emails, you know, what you're, again, what you model, your team will adopt, right? And so the outcome working with the school leader was once we worked together on like how to set parameters for that school leader in communicating with staff, the performance increased, right? Staff started complaining less about how exhausted they were, right? The attendance improves, right? So the stress will decrease when you are actually being mindful as a leader of your staff and the actual um and the well-being, period, right? Because balance doesn't compromise performance. When you incorporate balance, it actually enhances performance. Okay. So you can't preach balance yourself as a leader. And I need you to think about this, right? You cannot preach balance while living in imbalance. Okay. If your team only sees you working 24/7, they'll assume that that's the standard. Like I said, what you model, your team will adopt. Okay. They will assume that the standard is, you know, she's working 24/7. That means I need to do it too. No, that's going to lead to burnout. Okay. So here's an action step I have for you for that. I need you to consider how to model balanced behavior, right? Because think about it. If you have a lot of staff in your building who are saying that they're burnt out, they're exhausted, I'm going to point the finger to you and ask you, what are you doing? What are you doing or not doing that is contributing to your staff feeling burnt out? I know it's going to be uncomfortable to hear that question and for you to even think about, like, it's not my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault, but I'm saying you do need to be reflective and introspective to see how your actions or the lack thereof are contributing to your staff burnout. I'm going to keep it real with you. That's what it is. Okay. So, an action step for you is model balanced behavior. Leave work at a reasonable time. Take real breaks and let your staff know that you're on a break, right? And make self care a visible priority, right? This will send a positive message to your team that well-being and performance go hand in hand. Again, if your staff, if your staff is saying that they're burnt out, if you have multiple staff saying that, I need you to take a look at what you are or are not doing. Just keep it real. Okay. That's the truth. So share your thoughts. Your action step right now is to, I'm going to ask you to think about this week, how are you going to model how to balance the behavior as a leader in your building for your staff? Okay. How are you going to model that? Okay. Here's the second thing. You're welcome, Ellen Oliver. I'm glad somebody's watching it because it's 10:30. All right. The second thing I want to talk about with that is fostering high expectations and performance without burnout, right? So high performance, right? Because as a school leader, we all have this pressure. And in the state of Virginia right now, they changed the standards and making the standards even higher, which is great because the bar was low anyway, right? Our goal is the ceiling, not the floor. And it was the floor. But now it's putting schools under this pressure to do better, which our kids need. So I'm all for that. But understand that, high performance and well-being are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they are interdependent. They depend on each other to work, right? So in phase one, Mind the Gap from my book, I talk about the importance of bridging the gap between current practices, desired outcomes, your values, right? This includes creating a culture where both high performance and self care coexist. It's absolutely possible. And for every leader, it's going to look different. It's not going to be the same for each leader. That sweet spot is for you and where you and your staff are in terms of high performance and a healthy culture, right? So when we talk about balancing responsibility, so as leaders, you have to push your teams to reach their highest potential, but the path to doing that, right? The path to that success shouldn't be paved to burnout. And I'm guilty of this too. Very early in my principalship, in my years as a principal, my expectations were so high. I actually did that too. Like I was burning them out, and I had to realize, like, wait, I'm a common denominator here. If there are multiple staff that are saying that they're burnt out, it's something that I'm doing, right? So it's your responsibility to create a framework where high expectations are supported by the right structures. That's where process power comes into play. What structures, what systems do you have in place to support those high expectations? Is it a loop, right? Where's the loop? How are you coming back to make sure that staff are doing what they need to do and supporting them in the right way? Are you giving them feedback? Are you going back to check, right? Everything's about a loop. So here's a tangible practice that I want you to consider. Set clear expectations and provide the necessary resources for your team, right? If you want them to meet it, you have to be really specific about it, right? You can't demand high performance without giving your team the tools and the time that they need to be successful. Also consider regular check-ins. I say this all the time, and I'm going to keep saying it. Regular check-ins are not just about performance, but it's also about checking in on their well-being. Commit the time to do that. When you commit the time to do that and they see that, wow, she's checking in with me every week, every month, consistently, okay, he or she is really, like, sincerely cares about my well-being, right? Ask questions like, what do you need? How can I support you? How are you managing your workload? Right? And really listen to them and listen for the things that are not being said too, right? So an action step for you. This week, I need you to consider, how are you going to begin integrating well-being into your leadership conversations with your staff? The school year just started. Everyone's still on a high. That burnout is coming very soon. We both know it. Okay. So how are you going to begin integrating well-being conversations with your staff, especially your leadership team? Let your team know that personal well-being is as important as their professional performance. They go hand in hand. They are not mutually exclusive, right? This will help create a culture where self-care is normalized, right? It's not an option. We need every adult body in the buildings. You know, we have a shortage in education anyway. So we need them. Okay. Let me know your thoughts. What are you thinking? How have you implemented these things with your staff before? Are you a staff person where you have been under the tutelage of a leader and that leader has modeled balance for you in a way that now you're doing that in your professional role? Okay. Share your thoughts as you're watching the replay. And another aspect of this, pushing for high performance and well-being is what are the long-term strategies that you have for sustaining balance in leadership, right? And this is particularly important for you and your leadership team. So one of the core messages in my book, Decisions by Fire, is the concept of staying the course, right? Remaining consistent in leadership actions, especially when it comes to balance and when things are difficult, right? Staying the course, no matter the circumstance. So balance really isn't about a quick fix, right? It's something that should be an ongoing commitment that you are saying, yep, this is something that um ooh, this is something that I'm going to commit to every single day with real intentionality, right? It's an ongoing commitment to creating a healthy, high performing environment, right? But also keeping in mind how you're taking care of your well-being and your staff's well-being, right? So sustaining balance in the long run. So as a leader, establish some long-term strategies that prioritize that balance that's needed, even during the high pressure times, right? So high expectations are constant, especially in urban education. The target always seems to be moving, but balance must be maintained over time, right? Not only for you to stay effective and engaged, but for the long run. You want long-term balance, right? So, how you can do this in real time is setting up routines. So, if you set up routines that encourage sustainable performance, for example, builds in quiet work hours, right? Where you block off time where there's no meetings and no call schedules, allowing staff to recharge, allowing your team to recharge where they block off certain times where they can get things done. Because we know in education, you're constantly being pulled in multiple directions in any given day because we're dealing with human beings, right? And that stuff happens, okay? And this, I say it all the time because I feel like it's something that we don't do as leaders, is because of the pace that we're working on, is we do not take enough time to reflect. So devote time to reflect on how, like, even just do it quarterly. Start quarterly on how balance is impacting your team. This again is data, right? You're taking time to reflect, and in this reflection, you are gathering qualitative data, which is just as important as your quantitative data. So you're taking time to reflect and gather data on how balance is impacting your team's performance, your leadership team. How are they responding, right? Is burnout creeping back in? Right? Make adjustments once you have this reflection, and bring these reflections to your team and have real candid conversations around how they're feeling about the burnout. Because burnout is going to happen, but having conversations about it and talking about how they are feeling is really important. Right? Because a lot of times people just want to be heard. They just want to be heard, and they want to be felt like that they're understood, right? When you think about the hierarchy of needs, like that physiological need is real, okay? So a practice that I want you to consider is introduce quarterly well-being checks with your staff as a part of your leadership strategy. So you can gather anonymous feedback with a survey on how your balance is being maintained within the team, and use the data to guide your decisions, right? So develop a long-term plan, focus on balance. Gather the data and make the adjustments as needed, and share the data with your team, right? Gather data. It is absolutely critical, both qualitative and quantitative about it. The qualitative data is so important. It really, really is. Tell me what you're thinking. Like, is it, like, where would you find this in the structure of your day? Have you taken time? How often do you actually take time to reflect right? And I want to go back to the first two questions that I asked. One, how do you currently balance pushing your team to meet high expectations and ensure that they don't burn out? And then two, how are you modeling that balance between high performance and well-being for your team, right? How are you pushing them? And then how are you modeling that? Okay. Think about that as you are engaging with your leadership team throughout the year, especially for this first quarter. So, in my book, I emphasize the need for leaders to cultivate trust and accountability, which ties directly to how we balance high expectations and well being, right? So, trust isn't built when teams are running on empty, right? It's built when leaders, you actually show that you value their performance and their health, that you care, right? So think about this. If you see someone who's sick in the classroom, are you going to ask them to stay because you don't have anybody to cover? Are you going to ignore that they're sick and act like, you don't see that they're sick because you don't have any coverage for the room? Are you going to send them home? Right? So think about that for a second. Strategies to balance high performance with well-being. One, clarity. Clearly define what expectations look like and provide the resources and time to achieve them, right? When there's clarity, the stress of uncertainty is eliminated. Two, support. It's not just about checking in, it's about providing actionable steps, training, and resources to help your team meet the high expectations without hitting the wall, right? Three, celebrate wins. So in phase 3 of my book, Ethos Shift, which is, the culture, how you're shifting the ethos in your building, I discussed the power of celebrating small wins to build momentum. And so when the team is meeting, when your team is actually meeting high expectations, celebrate it. Right? Recognition is a huge part of maintaining balance, right? Gives them just the momentum, like the energy that they need, the inspiration that they need to keep going. So an action step for you is plan for recognition. Like, how are you creating moments where you're celebrating both the performance and well-being achievements of your team, right? Celebrate, reinforce the idea, right? When you reinforce it, it becomes extremely valuable and a part of the culture. Okay. So share your thoughts. Tell me what you're thinking. I know I'm talking fast because it's 10:46 p.m. and I did not want the day to go by. I wanted to make sure that I committed to this, even though I'm at this conference, the EdLock conference. And so here's some action steps I have for you. So as we wrap up, here is your playbook to implement. Ready? 1, model balance through your actions. Take breaks, set boundaries, leave work in a reasonable time. 2, implement team practices that prioritize both performance and well-being, such as regular check-ins and setting clear performance expectations paired with resources. Okay? 3, reflect quarterly on the impact of balance within your team. Collect the qualitative data and make necessary adjustments to keep the culture thriving. Okay? Those are the 3 things, your 3 action steps. So, balance is an ongoing practice, okay? It's the heart of empathetic and effective leadership. So when you lead with balance, you create a culture where high expectations and well-being can actually live together and thrive together, right? This is where your team will truly succeed, right? It's about hitting goals and sustaining long-term excellence, because that's what our children deserve. That's what they need. So leaders, school leaders, you courageous leaders, you are the key to building a culture where performance and well-being can coexist. Remember, they're not mutually exclusive. Your team will follow your example. They will follow your example. Okay. Like I said earlier, what you model, the team will adopt. Okay. Um, and just keep going. When you keep balance as the foundation, this leadership balance, you will lead a team that will be able to meet your high expectations and exceed them evenly, like even exceed them without burning out. Okay. So if you're watching the replay, if you hopped on and hopped off, thank you very much for taking a second or two to listen in, because I know it is late, and I need to prepare for day 2 of this EdLock conference, which is all day long, which is wonderful because it's packed with a whole lot of information and meeting wonderful people who are about the work of kids. So keep going, and I'll catch you next week as I start the live expert series every day next week. I'm going to have a guest every evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And experts just talking about the work that they're doing in education and providing some excellent pointers and action items for you to, and strategies for you to take with you as you are listening in. So I hope to see you next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, right? For each day, a new expert. So we have a social justice work expert, and how that Dr. LaShawn Stenton, I believe she's coming on Tuesday. We'll be talking about how the work she does with leaders and teams with social justice work in schools. On Monday, I'll be talking to Dr. Rosalind Gaskins, who works with leaders and building community. And on Wednesday, I'll be talking to Dr. Arisa Allen Rochester, who does DEI work with school leaders. And then on Thursday, I'll be talking to Fahara McKinney, who works with restorative practice, building restorative practices with leaders and how to build it with their teams and teachers and things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to talking to these experts next week, Monday through Thursday at 6 p.m. And I hope to see you there. Have a great evening. And thanks for signing on and checking it out, and leave your comments. Tell me what your thoughts are. Have a great evening.